What is going on, everybody? I am back today because recently I made a video talking about some of the most disturbing films that I've ever watched. And I had a lot of fun making that video, and I had people leave me comments and talking to me about movies that they thought were super disturbing. And some people asked if I would do a part 2 of that video. And so I decided today to go back through and talk about some more films that I think are incredibly disturbing. Movies that made me feel sick or ill while I was watching them, movies that made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. And I love that type of art. I love art that kind of pushes boundaries and that makes you feel uncomfortable. And so I'm excited to talk about more films with you today. So first up in disturbing films, we're going to talk about a French extremist horror film, and that film is Inside. And this movie takes place around Christmas, which is always great to take the most joyful time of year and turn it into violent chaos. And it is about a woman who was in a car accident with her husband. Her husband died and she was pregnant. She's going to the doctor to make sure that the baby is okay, and they tell her everything's fine and to just go through Christmas, and when Christmas is over to come back in for a follow-up appointment. Well, she ends up going home by herself. Her family hasn't come over for the holiday. She gets a knock on her door, and it's this woman, and she's being incredibly strange. She ends up calling the cops. They can't find the woman, and the woman ends up breaking into her house and attempting to kill her and her baby on Christmas. This movie is violent, it's disturbing, it's uncomfortable. It does an amazing job building tension because not only do you have this woman who's just been through this absolutely horrible tragedy of losing her husband, but at the same time she's pregnant, and this woman is trying to murder her in her house and kill her and her baby. There are moments in this where I just like found myself like gripping my hands as tight as I could on the edge of my seat. It is just a movie meant to make you feel uncomfortable and meant to make you feel uneasy. And so many of these movies could go into the gross out for gross out territory, and it's not. It really is very well shot, very well executed, and it's a movie that I haven't stopped thinking about since I watched it the first time, but it is not for the faint of heart. Up next is another French extremist horror film, and this movie is called Martyrs. You will see a lot of people talk about this as one of the most disturbing films ever made, and I would have to agree. This is about a young woman who is kidnapped and tortured when she is a kid, and she decides to go and get revenge on the people who kidnapped and tortured her. The narrative structure is really unique. It's almost impossible to explain without watching the movie, and it's a very unique tone. The second half of the film is very different than the first half of the film, and it is just bleak and sad and really one of the most depressing movies I've ever watched in my life. There's just no way around it. It's sad and depressing, but it's also disturbing, and the violence in the second half of the film is like, it's really hard to watch. It's really disturbing and despicable, but the film is also really thought-provoking, and it gets into the territory of these people who are going through these really intense, sick, disgusting, depraved, violent acts, and like, would it open up a person's brain in a different way to where they would think differently if they suffered that level of torture? And the director dives into some really interesting territory, thinking about the human brain and how it processes grief and how it processes trauma. And it's a movie that's impossible not to leave you thinking for hours after you watch it. As I said, it's very violent. So if you're not good with violence, you're not going to be able to handle it, but it is a movie that is worth watching if you've never seen it. Up next is one of my favorite films of all time, Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse. This movie is disturbing, and what I love so much about it is uneasy and unsettling and uncomfortable. There's essentially three actors in this entire movie, and one of them I do not believe speaks a line of dialogue, the woman who plays the mermaid. Otherwise, you get two brilliant performances from Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe. The movie starts off as a slow descent into insanity where these characters just fight with each other consistently. They're building up anxiety, these conversations that they have with one another. There's like no trust between them, and it just builds and builds and builds until you get into the third act when everything blows up out of control. And there are some of the strangest, wildest imagery I've ever seen in a movie. One of the shots in the third act is one of the most disgusting things I've seen in a film. The visual style of this movie is beautiful. The black and white cinematography is incredible. It accompanies the film so well. It feels like something that could be put into a time capsule and you wouldn't know what era it was filmed in if someone didn't tell you. I love this movie a lot. It makes me very uncomfortable every time I watch it, and those are the best movies to me. Up next is the film Raw from director Julia Ducournau, another French movie. The French love making strange, surreal, disturbing content, and Raw is no exception. This is a coming of age cannibal story about a young woman who goes to veterinary college. She is a vegetarian. She has never eaten meat before, and as a hazing ritual, they make her eat, I think it's a bug or something like that. I can't remember 100%. I think it's like a worm or something. And after she eats that, she gets an insatiable hunger for flesh and starts eating raw chicken and eating all this really crazy stuff. And it just amps up more and more and more. And I've said this before on my channel, I don't get uncomfortable by a lot of things, but cannibalism makes me feel very ill. I have a really hard time with movies about cannibalism. This movie about made me throw up 2 or 3 different times. It's very disturbing. There are some sequences in this that are forever seared in my brain that I don't think I will ever be able to wash away. But what I love about it is, obviously, like I said, coming of age movie about a cannibal, but it's incredibly thought provoking. And the idea that this person consuming human meat eventually is working at a veterinary college, it really opens up a lot of interesting commentary. And that's what I love about Julia Ducournau as a director, is her movies are so thought provoking and unique. Titan is another one I could have put on this list, but it's a really unique viewing experience. And if you've never seen Raw before, please watch it. It is phenomenal. Up next is the film The Piano Teacher from director Michael Haneke. This movie is disturbing in a psychological sense. It is about a woman who has an abusive relationship with her mother, and she ends up dating this guy, and they end up having this really weird psychosexual relationship where abuse ends up playing a big role in it. You can tell that our lead character does not have a lot of self-respect because of the way that her mother has treated her and essentially babied her entire life. And it's disturbing in a way that's very sad, and the performances in it are absolutely incredible. I mentioned Michael Haneke in my last video, Funny Games. He has a way of creating really disturbing content that's incredibly thoughtful. So it's like we live in a society now where I feel like challenging cinema is going to be harder and harder to come by, because I feel like media literacy is at an all-time low. People don't understand intent, and they don't understand when a director takes challenging and uncomfortable subject matter, turns it into a film for you to think about things on a deeper level. And that's the thing I love about Haneke as a filmmaker, is he always makes movies that are very challenging and very uncomfortable, and The Piano Teacher is no exception. It's absolutely brilliant. If you've never seen it before, please watch it. It's incredible. Up next is going to be the A24 film Saint Maud from director Rose Glass. This is about a young woman who finds God, and she ends up working as a nurse for this woman, and she's not 100% okay about her lifestyle and the choices that she makes, because she's been brainwashed by the church to think a very specific way, and she ends up believing that she is tasked by God to do this very specific task. And we as an audience can see it's definitely not God, but she thinks that it is. And there is some incredibly disturbing visuals in this movie, and the things that our lead character does to herself are heartbreaking. And I think what's so interesting about this movie is it's disturbing in the sense that it's incredibly sad. This person is brainwashed and manipulated because of a faith, and they think that they have to act a certain way in order to function correctly, in order to live their life the way that it's going to be to the fullest. And that's sad. And as someone who grew up in a church and who watched people go through this type of thing, it's just really saddening, and it's disheartening. And this movie always breaks me when I watch it. I also think that it's just incredibly well acted and well directed, and it's one of A24's most unique films in their catalog. If you've never seen it before, watch it. And then I'll do one more on this list today, and this film is incredibly disturbing in a saddening way, and that is You Were Never Really Here, directed by Lynn Ramsey. This is a film starring Joaquin Phoenix, and he is a man that hunts down child predators. And this movie is heartbreaking in every sense of the word, but it's also incredibly disturbing because of the subject matter. And it's one of those movies that just leaves you thinking long after the movie is over. It's very small and intimate. Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal of the lead character is incredible. It's a very violent film, and the violence is showcased in a very raw way that is like visceral. It doesn't feel like you're watching a Hollywood movie. The violence feels very in your face and very realistic. And movies like that always take me by surprise. I love this movie a lot. Lynn Ramsey is one of my favorite directors, and if you've never seen one of her movies before, this is a good one to start with. So that's just some more films that I think are disturbing. I wanted to give you guys another list, and I'm excited to hear more films that you think are disturbing. So let me know in the comments some of your favorite disturbing films. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.